Good morning and welcome back to the second day of Gangland, the final conference of TRANSGANG and LEBAN, a comparative research project on youth street groups in Europe, Africa and the Americas, funded by the European Research Council and developed in the last 5 years at the Universitat Pompeu Fabra. Please, if you can sit in the first seats for better attention. And let's open the next session called TRANSGANG, Gender's Perspective, Boys, Girls and Gangs. The chair is Nele Hansen and the participants are Maria Oliver, Hamida Travelsi, Mustafa Omrane, Licia Labiel, William Ross, Dena Carson, Chris Melde and Abir Musle. We ask you to please respect the schedules since at 10:30 is coffee break time. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mariana. Good morning to everyone. I hope you had a good night's sleep and you're not too tired after the long day yesterday. It's a pleasure to share with you, and we're really enlightened to be together with you here to discuss some issues concerning gender with our researchers present at the table. So I will briefly present the participants of this table. So here to my left is Dina Carson. She's an associate professor of criminal justice in the Paul H. O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. And her work focused on the role of group processes in gangs and delinquent peer groups, gang disengagement, as well as the impact of gangs in the school setting. Welcome, Dina. Thanks for joining us. To my right, we have Chris Melde. He's a director and professor in the School of Criminal Justice at Michigan State University. His research interests include the study of violence and its prevention, with special emphasis on the study of gangs and gang membership in the life course, school violence, and public perceptions of crime and victimization risk. Welcome, Chris. Then we go on with Hamida Travelsi. She holds a PhD in ethnology and social anthropology. She's an assistant professor at the Higher Institute of Human Science of Tunis, El Manar University, and she's a researcher at the International Network of the Laboratory of Social Anthropology in Paris. So she is very interested in gender relations in the culture and practice of Arab societies, and works in projects with the relation with women empowerment and leadership, women training, etc. Welcome, Hamida. Then we have in the middle, we have Abir Musle. She's an assistant professor and the chair of the Department of Social Sciences at Bethlehem University. And she is the AVP for the MENA region for the RC34 Sociology of Youth at the ISA. Her research interest is in youth collective action and community development, and focuses also on youth collaborative work in farming and youth work and gender. Welcome here, Abir. Thanks for being with us. Then we go on with William Ross. He is a spiritual leader in the Afro-Cuban faith for more than 20 years. He's a grassroots community organizer for more than 28 years. And he's also a senior member of the Almighty Latin King and Queen Nation, with a focus on archiving the history of the organization and challenging the notion that belonging to a gang equates engaging in criminal activity. Then we go on with Maria Oliver. She's a PhD student in communication, and she has been the local researcher of the Madrid case study of the TRANSGANG project. She is specialized in feminist studies and intercultural education, and currently she's developing her doctoral thesis on women in transnational gangs. She is a former founding member of the Latin King and Queen Nation in Spain, and author of the book which was published just some weeks ago, Latin Queen, Ascenso, Caída y Renacer desde el corazón de una banda. Welcome, Maria. Thanks for being with us. And then we have, hopefully online again, pardon, Ligia Laville. She holds a PhD in social sciences by the University of Antwerp. She's a professor of the Department of History of Arts of the University de Oriente in Santiago de Cuba, and she has worked on post-subcultural consumer music and youth fields. So after presenting the participants, the dynamic of this table will be the following. Ligia Laville will connect by Zoom. Hopefully she is now in the Zoom meeting, and she wanted to share with us her presentation. So she has prepared a presentation based on her study in Santiago de Cuba. And then I will give the word to Abir, and she will raise some interesting questions concerning the subject with the objective to open a debate, a discussion among all the participants, and then later also with the public, so we can have an interesting conversation all together. So is Ligia Laville online? Question mark. Yes, I spoke to him. I don't remember the name now. Enrique? No. But he should be there. Can somebody check if... yeah, can you check? And if not, we go on with the debate, but maybe we can just wait 1 minute and see if there's a connection. Ahora sí. Okay. And here's our latest member of the table, Mustafa Omrane. He arrived now. He's a senior lecturer at the University of Kemis Miliana and associate researcher at CREAT in Algeria. He was a member of the Algerian team at the Sahwa project, and his areas of research are youth, population, and development issues. Also public health, demography dynamics, migration, and sustainable development. So, no? Okay, this is really a shame. Maybe Ligia can connect later, so we won't have a presentation, but maybe later she can join with us in the debate and discussion and hear her on her experiences. So I give the word to Abir.
Thank you, Nella. And thanks for being with us in the morning after a long day yesterday and being here on time. Thanks for all the colleagues around. Maybe we could start like when we were talking about gender. Gender is a social construct that changes from one within the expectation of the role from one community to another. And when we're talking about youth street groups, also it is impacted with the dynamics of the groups and with the larger community. So what we're gonna try to talk about, then we're gonna have like 4 questions in which we are gonna try to discuss the various hierarchies of gender and the processes that are defining all these gender roles and place of different genders within the group and within the larger context in which they operate within. So I would like to start with the first question, which is the binaries, for example, that we have between private and public, religious, Western, caring mother, the Madonna, and the deviant daughter, for example. How would they actually diminish or expand the space available based on gender for young people within these groups? If we can reflect from the various case studies that we have about these binaries and how they're impacting the dynamics of gender, and whoever would like, we can start the discussion.
Okay, so in my view, I'm going to speak from the Madrid case, which is the one I have studied. I've realized that when studying gangs and when regarding gangs, there are two things related to, and I'm going to say sex and not gender here, because I understand gender as an oppression system against women in general, and I'm going to say sex differences here between male and female members of the gangs that I have researched. In the case of women, they have been imposed some kind of roles inside gangs that are more or less the same as society have imposed on them. So they have to take care of hermanitos or brothers or inside the gangs. They are supposed to. They are the ones that go to jail to visit. They are the ones to take care even of the kids of not only sisters or other women, but also of male members of the gang in a lot of situations. So these kind of inside and outside the house roles, so women belong more or less to the care part of the social system, reflects on the gangs. So even if you care in the street, you are still taking the role of the one who takes care of the rest of the group, of the male members, of the kids of the group, and of the rest of the people in the group, or maybe the mothers of someone who is in jail or things like this. So this translates from the general social perception to the street. But girls and women in gangs fight these roles. I mean, they choose, in many cases, not to take care or create their own communities apart from the social roles they have been established for them. And they fight and they discuss these roles in different ways. I mean, some of them are by creating their own communities and even their own gangs, and even in some cases reproducing the violence that is mainly performed by male members of the groups. When they do that, and this is my second point, and with this I finish with that, is because they understand that to be equal or to have the same rights within the group, they have to perform the same actions, even if the actions are negative. So we are trying now to get to a point where, or well, from my point of view and from my studies, I am trying to discuss also. I started my PhD thinking women can also be violent, women can also be delinquents if they want, and now I am starting to think I don't want women to be violent, or I would prefer that that's not the role we need to take in order to be taken seriously. And so they are starting to realize also that it's better for them to make a community separated from the violent roles, but also from the care roles imposed from the outside. But I realized that that is a point I need to study more about this, how you need to perform what is considered to be male roles to be taken seriously in the public space. And that's it for now.
Thank you. Good morning. My research has found that the roles women play are linked more to ethnic and cultural norms in the gang system in Chicago, and as well as concepts that are often dismissed. It is a notion within the male membership that they are expendable. And that is something that we see both culturally and socially, that the male dynamic feels it's expendable. It's not that they're going to go outside and gang bang or be violent because the women cannot. It's that they're going to go out and do these violent things in the name of defending the community. And if the community causes them to lose their life, be it in prison or in death, then it's just a part of the equation. And they subsequently just view themselves as expendable, whereas they view the females in the gang as the caregivers, as Maria was talking about, not only from a cultural perspective, but from a biological perspective. There is an interesting articulation that the membership in my research does where they say, quite frankly, if it were not for the ability for the women in the gang to reproduce, there would be nobody else in the community. Whereas the men should be the fathers, and if they're not here, somebody else can assume that role. So there's this concept of detachment and expendability where the men would say, if I'm not here, somebody can take over for me, but if the women are not here, we cannot take over for them. In terms of equality, that has proven to be a fluid concept. What is equal to one person is not equal to another, especially when dealing with law enforcement. It is very, very known in the United States that a man can commit a crime, the woman can commit the same crime, and the punishment is going to be completely different. There's also the issue of the family dynamic within family services. I had worked several years in the foster care system, and the rules for a male to regain parental rights are extremely different than the rule for a woman to regain her maternal rights. We've seen many situations in the foster care system where we'll have mothers who have had 10 children, 9 of which were born addicted to some kind of narcotic. But the 10th child, and all of them removed by the system, but the 10th child, because the mother was engaging in some kind of rehabilitative services, gets to stay with the mother. Even though she's still a drug addict, even though she's lost the other 9 children, she'll keep the 10th one because she's the mother. The father, on the other hand, no record, no drug abuse, is still just not the mother. And that's really just how the law kind of draws the line in the sand. And that permeates into the organizations when the men say, we're fighting because if we don't make it home, we don't make it home. And the women have to be home because the law is different for them. So they don't view them so much as one better than the other. They view it more as difference. I think that when the academic community or even social workers view the dynamics of street organizations, gangs, community organizing, when they look at communities of color and they try to define gender roles, in the United States it tends to be a very whitewashed concept. It is a very European whitewashed, this is what is the husband, this is the wife, this is the man, this is the woman, so forth and so on. And they do not take into account cultural norms, ethnic norms, things that are normal for me as a Puerto Rican may not be acceptable to someone else. I remember growing up, the famous, pow pow. If my mother had to hit me, it was, she hit me. It was what it was. And you couldn't do it now. In American society, it wouldn't make any sense. I remember I was 6 years old and I went to school and they told me, if your parent hits you, call this number and they can't hit you anymore. And all the white kids in the class were like, yay! And so I went home and I told my mother, hey, you can't hit me because I have this telephone number. My mother beat the shit out of me with the phone and said, call him. And to me, that was not so much abuse as much it was a cultural component. If you're looking at Black and Latino street organizations or gangs, you have to look at what that means culturally, what that means ethnically. We cannot just choose to say it's 2023, let's define the role of gender or sex in 2023 with people who are still thinking from a concept that is rooted in antiquity. Doesn't make it right to me or wrong to me. It simply means that I cannot go into a setting and say, hey, you guys are treating the women as less than, or they're not equal, because they will come back and tell me there's no such thing as equality, and that's it. So.
Mustafa, can we ask you to translate for Hamida?
Okay, thank you, Mustafa. Good morning. Bonjour, veuillez m'excuser, je vais parler en français. Donc, je compte sur Mustafa pour traduire ce que je vais dire. Donc, je tiens d'abord à rappeler, comme l'a dit Madame Najar hier, que nous avons travaillé sur 3 groupes différents. Les groupes des graffitis, le groupe des beaux, qui est essentiellement un groupe à activité artistique, un groupe de hip-hop et on a travaillé sur les jeunes du secteur informel. Et ben, les dynamiques du genre dans ces trois groupes sont complètement différentes. En ce qui concerne le groupe des graffitis, là où la présence féminine est très, très minime, les activités se font essentiellement le soir. Donc, on a vu dans les entretiens que les filles ont besoin, par exemple, d'autorisation parentale pour sortir la nuit. Donc, il y a ces différentes types temporalités. Le jour, c'est pour les filles, le soir, c'est pour les garçons. Les garçons peuvent sortir librement le soir, alors que les filles, ils ont besoin d'une autorisation parentale. Les rôles aussi, on a remarqué que les jeunes de graffiti, les rôles de leader sont tenus par les hommes, naturellement. Par contre, il y a un point intéressant dans ce groupe, c'est que la fille qui est la plus active dans ce groupe, elle est, c'est-à-dire, elle appartient à une catégorie très religieuse de filles, elle est voilée et tout ça, mais elle pratique quand même le graffiti, ce qui est perçu par la société tunisienne comme un peu paradoxal. Ça ne peut pas être une fille voilée qui appartient à un groupe de jeunes de graffiti. Je trouve ça, c'est très important. Je vais aller doucement pour que Mostafa puisse traduire et puis je relance sur le deuxième et troisième groupe. Vas-y, j'y vais. Pour le groupe de Beau, ces rapports de genre existent aussi par le nombre déjà des filles qui sont dans le groupe. Il est très minoritaire. Par contre, quand la fille elle est dans le groupe, elle réussit à avoir des rôles importants dans le groupe. On a par exemple une fille qui a un doctorat et qui gère toute la logistique administrative et tout ça du groupe, surtout avec la transformation du groupe en une association. Donc, elle a vraiment un rôle important dans ce groupe. Et ces rapports de genre ne sont pas vraiment très existants parce que pour eux, du moment que la fille puisse remplir des responsabilités, elle est traitée égal à égal à l'homme. Et ceci d'autant plus après la révolte. Les femmes tunisiennes en général ont essayé d'entrer dans la vie politique, de prendre l'initiative, d'avoir des responsabilités et tout ça. Donc les rapports entre hommes et femmes dans cette société ont vraiment changé après la révolte. C'est vrai que tout le monde sait que depuis l'indépendance avec Bourguiba, il a travaillé sur l'émancipation de la femme de la Tunisienne, mais surtout on le voit ça aussi après la révolte. J'arrive maintenant au troisième groupe, qui est le groupe du jeune du secteur informel, et là, les femmes sont complètement absentes. Il y a des espaces, des temporalités différentes, des spécialités différentes. Les hommes sont à l'extérieur, ils se réunissent de la rue. Les femmes, ils sont dans les maisons, ils ne sont pas du tout impliqués dans l'activité de ces jeunes-là. Par contre, ils pensent que c'est un sexisme bienveillant, dans le sens où ils sont en train de protéger ces femmes parce que ce secteur, il est très difficile, il y a beaucoup de risques, et tout l'argent, parce qu'en fait, il y a beaucoup d'argent qui tourne, hein. Il y a des milliards et des milliards qui tournent dans ce groupe de jeunes. Ils font tout pour améliorer les conditions de vie des filles. Par exemple, les jeunes garçons, alors qu'ils sont initiés dès l'âge de 10 ans à conduire pour franchir les frontières à l'Algérie ou la Libye pour apporter les produits électroniques, les filles, eux, ils sont bien scolarisées dans les meilleures écoles et quand elles réussissent leurs études, ils payent pour les meilleures universités privées, ils leur achètent des appartements carrément pour ne pas être logés dans des foyers, etc. Donc tout cet argent qui circule entre les hommes, c'est les femmes qui en tirent profit en fait. Yes, okay.
Okay. Mustafa, can you provide us with a quick translation?
So our colleague was talking about gender dynamics through three groups in Tunisia. So their empirical research in Tunisia. For the first group, she said that for the group of doing graffiti in Tunisia, there is less participation for women because their activities are during night. So the woman needs to be authorized by her parents to participate, to go out and participate with other group members to do graffiti in the city. So, but she thought that there is an exception. One girl with Muslim clothes. She has been authorized by her parents, and she is perceived as a contradiction for the society, for the neighbors, as because when a woman has Muslim clothes, for them she must not be in the street in the night. But she was saying that this is an indicator of social change in the society. For the second group, for the example of the second case, a woman who has a PhD, she has PhD, and she's doing a lot of responsibility in the association. So for the social perception, there is no problem. She is equal to men because she is doing responsibility, and she has a good perception from the society. And for the third group, for in terms of informal activities, she said that there is clearly a division of tasks. So men are working, they get their money, and they are helping girls to go to school and to access for higher education, and they are facilitating them to get better life conditions, and they are supporting girls.
Can translate sexisme bienveillant.
Même en français, even in French, it's difficult to translate it.
I can do that. So I would just, a brief overview. My research style is a bit different in that in studying gangs, I take kind of a life course approach, and my interest really is in trying to explain behavior change. And so to do that, I use survey research methodology, longitudinal panel models, so where we follow youth, hopefully before they join a gang, and then we follow them over a period of time and survey them periodically to understand better what happens to a youth when they join a gang. And in particular, relative to, we can make a number of comparisons, relative to other youth in the same neighborhoods, in the same schools who don't join gangs, and then relative to themselves, right? So how do youth view themselves? How do youth behavior change when they join a gang and then when they leave a gang as well? And so really trying to tease apart some really general processes of behavior change and to understand how the gang context influences that. And so a lot of my research, again, focuses on larger samples, right? So in order to do that, to have a large enough sample of gang youth, we often have to survey a lot of youth in general, because a small fraction of youth become gang involved in many of the communities that we're in. And so some of my more recent work has used data out of the United States that's just under 4,000 youth at the time, where we followed them for a 5-year period, surveying them on 6 different occasions across that 5 years. And an interest area of mine is really in understanding self-reflected emotions. And so things like guilt, fear, empathy, anger identity, and how those things that are just part of the normal adolescent developmental process, how does that change across time for youth in general, and whether the gang context influences any of those processes in particular, and whether those changes in self-reflected emotions can help us to understand behavior change. So on average, what we find in the United States is that when youth join a gang, their probability of being involved in violence, being involved in delinquency, being involved in drug use increases. I think it's a good point that William raised earlier. It's not ipso facto, though. Not everybody who joins a gang becomes violent. Not everybody who joins a gang is automatically delinquent. But my research really tries to understand what are the mechanisms for those changes that we see on average, though, and can we explain that variation by the changes in those intermediary processes, like self-reflected emotions? Does that help us to understand why youth change their behavior, the severity of that behavior change, and then hopefully long-term also understand the consequences on the life course as well. So when youth leave a gang, how long does it take to get back to where they were before they started in a gang? Some of those particular questions, and really trying to figure out whether, in addition to that, gender dynamics and kind of that intersectionality between women negotiating what is oftentimes a very masculine social environment, how do they have to negotiate that, and can we see that in differences in behavior change, differences in emotional changes in the gang context that then that are produced by that masculine environment. And I can talk about results in a little bit, but I can pass it over to Dina. But so it's a bit different in that I don't study a particular gang or a particular gang context, but rather self-reported and understanding where people call themselves a gang member, and that's really how we track it over time. So it's not a particular gang environment, but a lot of gang environments across, really in this sample, across 7 cities across the United States. So.
Again, my name's Dina. It's nice to thanks Abir for that really thought-provoking question. Like Maria, I plan to reference it from a sex binary rather than gender. My research focuses really heavily on gang disengagement. So what youth are doing and the processes they go through when they try or work toward leaving a gang. And in the US, oftentimes we rely on that sex binary and we look at that in a quantitative way, right? And so oftentimes when we think about the processes or the motivations for youth leaving a gang, they look very similar across male and female. And however, when we use more qualitative research methods to really look at the underlying processes, we begin to see a lot of differences that occur across men and women. And so I'll just use an example in order to keep it brief. So if we look at the renewal of pro-social ties, right? So a lot of times motivations to leave the gang is, they develop these new pro-social commitments, right? One of those might be the caring mother. And we see that, men also create new pro-social commitments, but for women, it is that caring mother aspect that can facilitate leaving a gang. And then if they're not parents, oftentimes it is the idea of moving away from that deviant daughter idea and making themselves better daughters, better people in their parents' eyes. And I see this in my research, especially among the portion of my sample that is Latina, referencing Williams' ethnic and cultural ideas from earlier. But anybody who knows me knows I'm pretty brief, so I'll go ahead and hand it over to Mustafa.
Thank you. I think that in the case of Arab countries and especially for Maghrebian countries, Algeria and also Morocco and I guess Tunisia and Egypt, etc., the gender issue is really for me the major mirror of social change. Because we are talking about social change, cultural change, political change, etc. And for example, in Algeria, 10 or 15 years before, woman who drives a car was really exceptional, and it was really amazing to see a woman driving a car. But now, it's really a part of a social landscape. So it's not a problem for the society. It's accepted by the society. So the social change is slow, certainly. It's slow, but it's real. And in this case, the religion is very important because we are talking about Muslim countries, and you have to mention that for religion, the problem is the widely held ideas from classic media, from social media, and especially in the political context, and also from extremists who are trying to keep the woman at the house, and they are not accepting women in the social life. So the idea for the Women Association in case of Algeria, they are trying to develop women access to public life, to public space through Islam, because women who are who has the hijab as cloth, so she can go everywhere. So hijab is not an obstacle for women to access to social life. So really, there is a contradiction between modernity and tradition, and the social change is going on. And from a youth group perspective, we see that there is a change in terms of because there are fundamental principles and there are other variables. So fundamental principles are not cannot be changed in the society, but there are also variables. For example, women access to work, to university. For example, in Algeria, there is 70% of girls at the university, and in the labor force, 10 years ago, we were about 7 or 8% of women in the labor force, and now we are at the level of 18%. So we are progressing. So social change is slow, but it's here, it's there. So thank you.
Ligia, me has dicho que nos puedes escuchar y te has podido conectar. Sorry, I will switch to English. Sorry for that. Ligia, can you hear us? Ligia, can you hear us? And could you try? Could you speak?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Yes, now we hear you. Great. Ligia, is it okay for you to join the debate that we already started and not to do the presentation because now we are already engaged in the discussion? I think it's more interesting. Maybe you can also share with us your reflections on these questions Abir raised.
Yes, I can do it.
Go ahead.
I can. So I sorry because I'm a little late. I'm late. I have prepared a presentation before, but now I just gonna to expose the most interesting points of my presentation. I apologize. I apologize because I'm a little outside of the line of the process. But well, I'm going to be. I want to be spontaneous. I want to be the most reflective that I can. So I have studied 3 groups. I always say that in Cuba it's difficult to say that it's done itself, but I have studied some groups that there are probably the most similar thing to GANs. In these groups, their gender relation is so rich, and there are some they give some clues about how is the relation among them. And the most interesting thing that I saw in these groups are in the line with the reflection that we have here is, for instance, for me, it's very interesting how young people are changing the gender perspective, how young people, how dancers are changing this prejudice, this relation in a more equitative way. In the case of I studied in the Enviados case, I saw how there are women, men, homosexuals, and there are all brothers and sisters. There are a family. They are a family, and the leadership is shared among every every part of the group. Every member of the group has a leader part of this leadership. So in this, it's not noticeable that this group is for when women when women enters to the group. So women are very have a very important role in the formation and in the succeeding of dancing groups. And this is important in this case because although you can see many male groups, when women are in the groups, groups change. So the relation among them, the relation between male and homosexuals and women is so transparent, is so equitative that I think this is an example of how young people can change their relation of gender into the society. This is one reflection that I have made. Another thing is in the case of Rastafarian. I think this is a very important case because Rastafarian, the deepest roots of Rastafarian are sexism. So Rastafari is a king, but women Rastafarian are queens, but women can be Rastafarian at itself. So this is depend of a gender perspective into the community. Women Rastafarian can be really Rastafarian. So in this case, the flexibility, the flexibility of the community allows that women are changing this role. Women has a role so equitative. Women are imposed. Women are saving their roles, and women can see themselves as Rastafari women. So this is a changing in the deepest root, in the deepest sexism rules in the case of Rastafari. I think that this case go further in the next presentation, maybe in the next presentation in Las Avellanas, is upon this matter, how Rastafari women are changing this position, the subordinated position into the community of Rastafari in Santiago de Cuba. So if you can help me with some questions, because this is so spontaneous, I have prepared something, but obviously I can expose that. So if you can make some questions that I can answer for you, it will be okay. Thank you, Nela.
Thank you, Leah. And also starting from where you were discussing how the flexibility of the community, how it's actually changing the roles. Maybe this is also a similar theme that we also heard around right now, that the different colleagues were talking about the sex divide, not a gender divide. So let's start from that. And we're talking also about how the understanding of which role we want to take as young people, young women or men, is based on, for example, the case with Dina is about if we're leaving the group or we're staying, what roles we're gonna take? What does that mean? So in this process, then we're talking about a negotiation process. So maybe
Yes.
we can talk more about what does this negotiation process means and how it happens within these groups. If we can have concrete examples of how the young people are negotiating their roles based on the sex and the position that they want to hold in the group. Because this is also one thing that we heard is where you are in the group, what is expected from you. Partially it's from the social structure of the group and it extends to the larger community, but how they are negotiating what they see fit or what is forced upon them within the social structure of the group and the larger community.
Yes, I think that I can answer that. In the case of Rastafari, it's very clear. It's very clear because they have a patriarchal tradition. That have been one of their main precepts. However, in the last decades, other approaches have prevailed. How women have achieved more leading roles, joining the community, and spread out this participation to the global community. Rastafari women in Santiago de Cuba, Rastafari is not precisely a gang. It's not a gang. It's just a culture. It's a community. As I say that I said that in Cuba it's difficult to speak in a public way about a gang because it could be dangerous. But there is gangs, okay? There is gang, but it's difficult to study them. Because of the political situation, the social and political situation of Cuba. So that's why I choose subgroups that couldn't, that don't be dangerous for me for the research. So that's why I took Rastafari. So I studied Rastafari like an interesting theme, an interesting community that could be achieve some rules of the TRANSGANG project. So Rastafari women, yes, they are negotiating their role. Probably some decades ago, they are doing this. So there is two lines to theme Rastafari on the basis of gender roles. The first line is Rastafari when see that women can be Rastafarian. She or they can be queens, but they are not Rastafarian. So in the second line, shared by men and also by women, they see how women can be considered Rastafarian because women can lead in, women can talk. So what Rastafari expect from women is they be quiet, they don't work outside. It's a very patriarchal culture. Even they both positions share the disposition about homosexuality. So Rastafari can be homosexual in both positions. But the second one, when women negotiate their roles, they change this position. So the changes of the central position of Rastafari into the culture is an example, is a clear example of they can be Rastafarian and they are negotiating their role because since they see themselves as Rastafarian, is a clear example that they are negotiating. They are in a process of negotiation. Okay, I am woman, but I can be Rastafarian. I can be a leader. I can be a family pillar. So this power position is interesting because women take the control. So women can talk, women can discuss, women can work, women can defend their culture. Their culture. Women is a central position of yes.
I would have to cut you short. Sorry.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Sorry, but we're running out of time, so I would have to ask colleagues to be direct to the point again. Hamida.
Ok, thank you. Je vais être très rapide pour permettre aussi à Moustapha de traduire. Donc, en fait, cette négociation, c'est vraiment un processus qui prend du temps. Et dans les trois groupes, on l'a observé différemment, justement. Pour les groupes graffiti et le groupe debout, la négociation, elle est plus facile. Les femmes accèdent plus facilement au rôle important dans le groupe. Par contre, dans le groupe de jeunes de secteur informel, cette négociation, malheureusement, on l'a vu, elle a dit hier, Madame Najar, a complètement échoué parce que avant, on a une collègue sociologue qui a travaillé sur ce groupe avant la Révolution et elle a noté la présence féminine dans le marché, la chose qu'on n'a pas trouvée du tout. C'est-à-dire les femmes ont été complètement exclues du marché et les hommes expriment clairement leur refus de la présence féminine dans ce marché, encore moins dans c'est-à-dire le passage des marchandises, etc. Parce qu'ils pensent que c'est un espace masculin et il doit le rester. Ils veulent être à l'aise, ils prononcent des gros mots, ils veulent se comporter librement dans cet espace. Donc voilà, le processus de négociation, il est vraiment très différent dans les trois groupes. Et ceci dit pour plusieurs facteurs. D'abord, il y a les groupes dans les régions frontalières et les groupes dans la ville se comportent différemment et le processus, justement la difficulté et la facilité de ce processus de négociation diffère. Dans les régions frontalières, en l'occurrence, là où sont actifs les jeunes du secteur informel, la région de Gafsa, Gasserine, etc., c'est des régions de l'intérieur de la Tunisie, les rapports masculins et féminins sont très codifiés, du coup cette négociation devient très difficile. Par contre, dans la ville, la capitale en l'occurrence, où il y a les graffitis, les groupes debout, l'insertion féminine se fait d'une façon plus fluide et plus facile. Mais il y a aussi un autre facteur, c'est justement le niveau intellectuel de ces jeunes et l'éducation de leurs parents, l'éducation familiale, le cadre familial dont ils sont vécus. Donc, ce n'est pas le même cadre dans les régions frontalières, les régions de l'intérieur, et le cadre de ces jeunes généralement diplômés qui ont des études supérieures, etc. Et aussi la nature de l'activité. Le troisième facteur, c'est la nature de l'activité. Quand il s'agit d'une activité culturelle, artistique, la négociation se fait d'une manière plus facile. Mais quand il s'agit d'une activité essentiellement commerciale, où il y a beaucoup d'argent, la négociation est difficile. Voilà.
So Hamida was saying that for the two first groups, the negotiation every time it's a process, and within the two first groups, negotiation is somehow easy, and within the third group, informal activities, it's women are really excluded from this activity, and they are rejected by men who are practicing trade in the Tunisian-Algerian borders. And she said that it depends. This negotiating process depends on three factors. The first one is regions. In the borders, there is no negotiation, and women are excluded from those groups. The second factor is education. When there are families with higher level of education, women have social status higher. And the third one is the nature of activity. For example, in the border regions, women are excluded, but in the cities, in the big cities, women have more facility to access for public space, work, and groups. And
sorry, Mustafa, but I speak about the activity of the group. When the activity group is cultural activity, it's easier for women to include the group. But when it's commercial,
within graffiti, it's easy. Graffiti groups, and in trade groups, it's not possible.
In my perspective, the research found that the concept of dividing the sexes is not always seen as a negative, but rather an opportunity for each sex to focus on the issues that directly affect them and respond to those issues in the first person perspective. So what we found was that we see that the men in the gang are incapable of being experts in topics that are primarily addressing women and vice versa. So there is almost a fraternal and sorority kind of version of the organization where the men don't have any shame in focusing on their collective issues, and then the women are allowed to focus on theirs. Where the organization comes together to deal with community issues that affect the group as a whole, we see gender or sex is then diminished, and membership of the organization is what takes the precedence. So when they're dealing with issues that are sex specific or gender specific, they have no problem in dividing. When they're dealing with issues that are social and not limited to the gender, they come together as members of the organization first.
Okay, yes, just very, very quick. Same. I think that we have one of the problems we have realized we have is that we have understood what is more valid or what is more important socially and within the gangs as well as related to what male members do. So once again, now we are trying to shift the focus for what is worthy within gangs, so what behaviors. So in roles of mediation talking and related to mediation issues, we don't want to study girls as the mediation agents just because they care more or they are more pacific, but trying to center that qualities are good qualities in general if we want mediation, peaceful conflict resolution, but not because there is a gender divided role.
Just thinking about my work, looking at, sort of the sex composition of a gang, right? So if I'm the only one of only or a few females that belong to a gang, a certain gang, my work really shows that these women are more likely to be victimized. They're, whether that's violent victimization or even emotional victimization, so thinking of like interpersonal bullying, that kind of thing. We also see a lot of dynamics change in terms of the activities that gang is involved in, as well as the organizational structure of that gang. And those, there's a lot of results, too much for me to cover in this time period, but we can talk about that in terms of even when the balance begins to shift and the sex composition is more even versus when there's more just an all-female gang or an all-male gang. All those dynamics are changing, and so in general, the point I would like to make is that the sexual composition of a gang has a huge effect on the activities and the experiences of people in those gangs.
I think in the case of Algeria and in the most Arab countries, women participation in youth street group is banned. It's really excluded. It's not possible right now in the Algerian society because there's a traditional division of roles. So traditionally, the public space is for men and the private space at the family level it's for women. So women has now access to public life, to school, to education, to work, etc. But women uses streets just to pass, to go to do shopping, to work, etc. But not for grouping within male. So it's really excluded and exceptional. Sometimes we can observe women participating in youth groups in the case of prostitution or toxicoman or something like that, but not in ordinary way within youth group. So when we find it's really exceptional, or really it will be a miracle in the Arab countries.
Thank you. Maybe because we're short in time and we would like to open for the discussion, but I would like to give every speaker, first, if anyone would like to pose a question for everyone in the group, or to give 1 minute for everyone to add whatever they think that we missed in this topic.
I'd just like to ask the one question. When we do the research in gangs, are we all looking at the organization from a realization that there are those who engage in the theoretical purpose of the organization? So if a gang says we're here for community empowerment, there are members who join that gang with the notion of helping the community, and then there are those who join that gang for the purpose of being, thugs in the street and following that Hollywood cinematic perspective. So when you all are researching the gangs, are you making a divide between those who claim to be community minded and those who are simply interested in criminal activity? If you're interviewing a Latin king who says, hey, I'm here because I want to help the community, versus an MS-13 who says, I don't care, I'm just here to kill, that's two very different members of gangs. So how are you all making that divide in your research?
Okay, I will follow that up, but I can also realize that there is a whole difference in the gangs I have researched. In my case, Dominican don't play, Trinitarios, and Latin kings and queens, and it's not the same. Male and female membership is not the same, and it's not the same the membership of a queen that the membership of a girl around Trinitarios gang who has no possibility to actually belong and to make decisions inside the group. And also one topic that hasn't been raised, and I just would like to pose in there, is sexual violence against women within and outside gangs, because this is something that is worrying in Spain at least, and in Madrid where I research, and it is not a gang thing, even though we find pieces of news talking about how gang male members rape girls or commit sexual violence against some girls that maybe want to belong to the gang, but we are also receiving the same information from group of boys who are not gang members at all that are also committing rape against girls. So I need to point that is a social problem, but it's not exactly or precisely a gang problem. It is a social problem that we need to address.
C'est juste pour Moustapha, s'il vous plaît. Je veux rebondir sur ce que vient de dire William. Je trouve que c'est une question très intéressante, justement, parce qu'il y a des membres qui intègrent certains groupes, non pas vraiment pour, comme il a dit, venir en aide à la communauté, changer la vie, etc. Par exemple, moi, j'ai vu ça avec les jeunes passeurs, les jeunes du secteur informel. Il y a deux groupes. Il y a les jeunes passeurs qui font passer la marchandise illégalement dans les frontières, il y a les jeunes vendeurs. Je parle des jeunes passeurs. Il y a certains jeunes qui disent « j'ai beaucoup d'argent, j'ai plus besoin d'argent, c'est pas pour l'argent que je fais, mais c'est pour les sensations fortes. C'est pour, c'est-à-dire avoir un sentiment d'être capable de transgresser, d'être dans un contexte de transgression. Et pour ces sensations fortes de confrontation avec la police, la douane et tout ça. Et je trouve ça, c'est très, très important, justement, dans le sens de la réflexion de Williams. Merci.
I was saying that she has observed that in the youth groups that are working in the borders, so they are getting merchandise from Algeria, I think, and Libya. So they don't. They are saying that they don't need to get money because they are already rich. They have money, but they need to get some huge feeling sensation, and they need to leave such sensation in confrontation with police, borders, and etc. And it's really a psychological aspects.
Can I just add to, I think, William, your question is really important, and it gets to, the overall, how we define a gang, right? And how we go about measuring it. And I know in the quantitative work that both Chris and I do, it is self-report. If a youth says that they are in a gang, we take them at face value, whatever that gang means to them. And certainly our data show that not everyone who self-reports as a gang member is delinquent or violent or in some ways, but they are still significantly different from the youth who say that they're not in a gang in terms of those qualities. However, I would like to add that we do, when we ask about gang activities, one of the activities on the list is helping in the community. And I think that, it is an empirical question for us to look at, are there differences of those individuals who say that they want to help in the community versus those who don't say that. And I just looked briefly at a subsample, and about a subsample of that I looked at in one study, about 30% said that they help out in the community as part of their gang activities. So I think that's an important thing to consider. Thank you.
So we'd like to open for the audience. If anyone would like to have a question, is there anyone who can pass a microphone around? Maybe we can collect a few questions, and if you can be precise to whom is your question, so it will be easier for the discussion.
It's not a direct question, but it's... So it's not a direct question but it's all the cases are very interesting. So just I have 3 points to share with you based on the research done in Morocco. So the first thing is I would like you maybe to comment more on the typology of young females who join different groups, like either by age cohort or by, I don't know, identity or by social class. Because, when we focus on gender or sex, we forgot that there are other dimensions that embedded in the gender dimension. And in the case of Morocco is just because it's a marginalized, underprivileged group. So joining the group sometimes is done by, as we say in our research, is by birth. So the typology you find is that we find the caring mothers. So we call her the Ummi, the mediator. And we find also mothers who are agent, like actors, because of their sons who were involved in different groups and criminal acts, they were obliged to become also actors among the group and protect the son. And maybe if the son is in prison, they take, al-Quffa, we say in Darija, like they take the food every month and the money. So that's one group. And then we found, like lagging behind women, like girls or wives or sisters who are just at the shadow of the male actors among the groups. And also the third category is that wives and girlfriends who were obliged when the main actor, who is the male, disappears, is assassinated or in prison. So the mother has, or the girlfriend has to play that empty space the male has. And there is the third category, which is, I think, neglected in the research, is the third generation is the sons and daughters of these either gang members or street groups, and maybe who can live in the cycle, the same vicious cycle of the gang. So that's one comment I want to share. The second one is there is a pragmatic economic, dimension to the groups. So either we have to focus on, the beings, social actors as actors without a culturalist explanation, especially in North Africa, because when we bring culture to the explanation, we tend to, neglect that there are gender and sex dimension. Because already when we go to the logic of gender and sex, we are already in transgressing the North African culture, So normal girls are not in the street groups, So we are dealing with a different group, ways of doing gender, which is maybe, I want you to reflect more on this, and thank you very much. It was very interesting to listen to you.
While he's passing the mic, can I just say, when we conduct research of any community or group, I really think it's important not to approach that group with any biases or expectations. We may want to research an organization and say, hey, we want to focus on the women or we want to focus on the children. But at the end of the day, we are a guest in the life of the individual or group that we're researching, and we need to be prepared to be guided by them. So they can come back and say, do you want to learn about the organization or do you want to learn about the women in our organization? And that would ultimately determine whether they would allow us to proceed or not.
Hello? Yes. I'm Ingelisa from Norway. I just wondered, because you all had this discussion on gender and on sex, and that distinction was interesting, I think. But I just wondered the difference. And also, what is pregnancy? Have you looked at certain risky periods for change? You have focused on the structures, many of you, but what about risky situations? For instance, pregnancy for a woman. Does it provide an opportunity for her to reflect and go? Or does she stay because she's pregnant? What about birth? That's also a situation that can be a risky situation. Does it have an impact on the women or the men differently? And then from my own experience with the Pakistani gangs in Oslo, they would marry, but first they would have probably married a Norwegian or a Brazilian or somebody multicultural or in their other ethnic groups. But then the parents would try to get them out of the gang by marrying them into a Pakistani woman in Pakistan and get her there in order to help them out of the gang. So that's situations that are special and gives opportunities. So that's my question. And another thing that I wondered about this last Rastafari, I didn't know anything about the previous work about it. But Rastafaris, to me, they are religious. They are worshipping Jah and Haile Selassie. So it was very strange to hear talk about Rastafarian as a gang. Yes.
Leah, are you with us? No.
Yes, I am.
Okay. Do you want to respond to that?
Yes, I wish to respond, and I wish to make a commentary before this question or before this last commentary.
Sure.
I would like to comment that the first thing, I'm going to comment two things. The first one is about the shadow roles of women in some groups. I think that it is responsible. It is also responsible, research responsible, when we put things like they see and when we take distance of what they see. For instance, in many groups, women are saw by them like the girlfriend of a man, of the girlfriend, the couple of another members of gangs, and she has that role. She don't have any other role. So in other cases, women are leader and women are have a central role into the group. So I think that it could be a good thing when we could put things like they sing, and we also have distance of what they sing. But I think that we have to be, we have to be real about the things that are happening in the group. So the other thing is about Rastafarian. Yes, I don't see that. I never say that Rastafarian is a gang. I say that Rastafarian is a group chosen because I can talk about gangs in Cuba. So Rastafari is a group, it's a community, it's more than a religious group. It's a cultural group, also religious, but it's a cultural group. When women, by the way, has now currently a central role, many of them, a leader role. There are lesser than a man, but many of them have a central role in this culture. But it has to be clear that Rastafarian is not a gang, because but I can talk about gangs in Cuba and then publish
Leah,
this
briefly, please.
study.
Briefly.
Okay, I finished.
Okay, great. So, Maria?
Well, thank you for the question. Two things in here. First one, the difference between, I am differentiating between sex and gender, because gender is a system created, it's a social construct. Gender is not real, sex is real. So women oppression is based on sex, not on gender. Gender is a tool to oppress women and to oppress sexual dissidents in many cases. This said, we assume that women went out of the gang. The gang, in many occasions, is the out for the girl. The out for the violence of the father. The out for family violence. That is the out. And women pregnant in gangs have community with other women. So they don't want out, usually. Maybe they are out of the streets. Maybe they are out of violent situations or of risky situations. But in my experience, both as a gang member, as a researcher with gangs, pregnant women don't leave the community that gang women provide for that woman. That's the best community they are going to have, and they raised in communities. It takes a village, and the gang is the village for raising the kid of that pregnant woman. So they don't usually want out. The gang is the community for them.
Yes, je veux juste rebondir sur ce que Rachid vient de dire. Ben justement, l'image de la femme qui reste à l'ombre de l'homme, en l'occurrence la mère, elle est toujours dans son dos, si on veut dire, elle le protège quand il est à la prison, c'est elle qui va lui amener à manger. Et c'est pour ça d'ailleurs que chez les jeunes du secteur informel, on remarque une image carrément sacrée de la mère. Hein, c'est une image sacrée, il ne faut pas faire... C'est-à-dire, par exemple, ils ne sont pas violents du tout, mais si quelqu'un prononce une parjure où il y a ta mère, il devient très violent. Donc, vous pouvez toucher à tout, Dieu, la religion, peu importe, mais pas la mère. Donc, il y a vraiment une image sacrée de la mère chez ces jeunes-là. Voilà.
Responding to Rashid's comments, so she was saying that in the border, for example, in her example of the border groups, the mother is really sacred. So in their imaginary, mother is sacred, and you can talk about everything. You can have bad words on everything except on mother. They are really, yes, they can be violent against it. Yeah. But for us as researchers, because we are basically researchers, so I think that it's important to think about our vision in this topic, and I think that we have to think about to what extent those groups, not only in North African regions but in the whole world, to what extent those groups can be seen as social change agents. So how they are adopting social values, which values they are rejecting, what are their social positions in political positions, cultural positions, etc. So it's very important for me, I think.
Thanks, everyone. And I think we had a great food of thought to think about. And it's important to think, especially that the study of gangs or youth street groups, if what we are actually reinforcing. Are we actually reinforcing the alternative spaces that the young people are finding and building and living within their communities? Or we're actually reinforcing a deficit model in which we are stereotyping the young people and putting them in a specific checkbox that we will feel at ease with. I think this is something that we need to think about. Also, this is something that I didn't hear, and I think we need definitely to reflect more on, is how the intersectionality between culture, between colonization, between patriarchy, and neoliberalism come all together to impact what's happening within these groups, why they are functioning in a specific way, how the gender roles are changing, or if we are going to talk about the sex division, why it is reinforced or changed, what are the various factors. I think it's really interesting when Hamida was talking about the education, but who has the access to education? Which class? That will make a difference and I think we need to take this step further when we're studying these groups. And another question I think we need to think about when we're taking these concepts that we've been using a lot in academia and in NGOs in all our interventions, are we assuming the oppression when we're using these concepts? Are we putting this mask on our eyes before we go into the people that we're researching, or we're accepting that we can go and accepting the knowledge that the people are giving us and using their terminology and their experience for creating a grassroots knowledge, not only that we can use in our universities. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.